Hi guys, welcome back to another edition of Ask Andy. Thank you for your questions. I've had a really cool one from my good friend Rohan. He's a keen sprinter. He used to sprint at a very good level, and he also likes playing a bit of football. And the thing that he asked me was to do with time management, because he likes to play at a high level of sport and he doesn't want to waste his time. So he was asking me, how do you find the right balance between not overcompensating and managing the current injury? Now, it's a good question, and I think if you've been an athlete in the past or competed in sport, it's a question that probably every single one of us have had to contemplate at some point in our sporting careers. Okay, so tip number one, understand the root cause of the current injury problem. Is it a muscular problem? Is it a structural problem? If we understand this, then it'll give us a good indicator on what we need to do so we don't waste our time. Tip number two, understand how the actual injury occurred. Was it through an impact? Did you get smashed in a challenge? Did you fall against something? Or is it something that has been occurring over time through maybe wear and tear? This could be, let's say, a defunct movement pattern. Tip number three, if you can't recognise tip number two, then it's time for you to see a specialist. Now, we don't expect you to understand everything about injuries, but that's what these specialists are here for. If time is what you are looking after, then go and see someone who knows what they're talking about and you cut things straight away. Trying hard is not always the way, but training smart could be the key to you unlocking the injury and saving your time. Tip number four, once you've understood the above, look at ways to strengthen the injury. Now, this could be through isolation and really honing in on an area, or it could be looking at resetting motor patterns. Sometimes, or a lot of the time rather, injuries are not always in localized areas. There is a chain of events that's happening that's causing the injury to occur. If we go back to your question about finding the right balance, I look at myself when I was an athlete versus now when I'm turning into a coach. The big thing was the amount of injuries I was getting as an athlete, and the big carryover for me turning into a coach was starting to understand things like anatomy, function, kinesiology, biomechanics, and having a better understanding for these things. Because the thing is, once you start having an appreciation for this area, then you weigh up the pros and cons to the things that you're doing in your sport versus how you're training and looking after the injured area. As I mentioned before, training smarter is the key, and it's not always a thought of, can I train harder all the time? A little train of thought. When training load is greater than the individual's capacity, this is when injury occurs. If training load is less than or equal to capacity, then we begin rehab. And when an individual's capacity to work is greater than the load placed upon them, then we're looking at prevention techniques. So these three things, if we start considering these things when we're creating programming and going out and doing it, we'll look after our injuries a little bit better. Tip number five, value the recovery principle. Now, finding the right balance was part of the question, and what we have here is understanding when is the right time to scale back to allow the injury to get better. If we keep going at something, the brick wall behind me, that's what you're going to hit. Crash and burn. My final tip, tip number six, and for me, the hardest tip of them all, be patient. It's a really hard thing to be patient because frustration sets in when we're injured, but believe me, the longer you're out injured, the more frustration you'll accumulate. Be patient. It is, for me, my number one tip, even though I'm sticking it at the end. Thank you, Rohan, for your question. I do know how much you love your sport. Please, 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 everybody, keep throwing me some more questions. You're giving me some good food for thought when I'm creating content. And if you're liking these videos, please share, like, and do whatever you need to do. See you again. Ask Andy.